Welcome to Ziffity Quick Chat.
The customer of the B2B company is demanding e-commerce. So I don't believe this is, the death of a salesperson. But, ultimately it's about the leadership making difficult change and facing uncertainty. If you're uncomfortable, that's a good thing. It's now a mandate. It's no longer an option to be in e-commerce if you're in B2B. There is so much ROI in e-commerce for B2B companies, and it comes from many places.
Hello everyone, I'm Ram from Ziffity Digital. Welcome to our podcast channel, Ziffity Quick Chat. The topic for today is going to be how B2B companies can become future ready. When we talk about becoming future ready, the first thing that comes to our mind is digital transformation, and e-commerce is at the heart of any digital transformation initiative. However, e-commerce is considered to be a heavy lifting for most of the companies, irrespective of their size or maturity. You'll be having a lot of pressing questions to be answered from a business point of view, starting from why e-commerce in the first place. That's the reason why we have an expert on board today in our podcast channel, and he's none other than Brian Beck. Brian Beck is one of the most trusted e-commerce advisors in the US and European markets. He has helped a lot of leading B2B firms take the right business decisions at the right time and achieve exponential growth in their respective niche market segments. Today, he'll be sharing a lot of facts and real-life e-commerce success stories, which he has garnered in his experience of over 27 years in the B2B e-commerce industry.
It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. And gosh, 27 years, you make me sound so old.
That's a lot of wisdom there, Brian.
I guess so. Almost 3 decades. Yeah, it's funny when I add up I started my career in the 1990s, and you're right. It has been over 25 years when we add in all of that experience. So I'm thrilled to be here and to talk to you and your audience about B2B e-commerce and what's driving it, all around the world. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for us. Yeah. So let's get started with the questions. And the first question is that why B2B companies should invest in e-commerce? I mean, what could be the reasons that can push them or encourage them to invest in e-commerce?
Well, yeah, no, it's a great question, Raman. It gets back to why, I even got into this field, right? And just a little bit of my background for the benefit of your audience. Of my 27 years in my professional career, more than 20 of that was as an operator. So I was the person in charge of running e-commerce, and a lot of my, big companies, but also, more emerging and smaller companies. And a lot of my experience was in the B2C side, right? So it was serving consumers, in the U.S. market, but also internationally, and bringing best practices and e-commerce at a time when it was new, right? It was the new thing in the 1990s and 2000s, first 2 decades. E-commerce was a new thing for consumers. And about 7 years ago, I left the operating side of the business and got into working with large companies on the B2B side. And what's so amazing about B2B, Ram, is that the opportunity is huge when a company embraces e-commerce for their B2B customers. The transformation that occur, the return on investment that can occur is enormous. And I like to joke, I got into B2B because it makes me feel young. It's the B2B industry is so far behind in many ways where B2C is. So in the consumer side of things, we were chasing after getting, 3 or 5 or 10% growth per year on our e-commerce business after having done it for 10 or 15 years. In the B2B side, when I talk about the transformation that can occur, you've got businesses that are, doubling the size of their business in less than 5 years by, small companies in some cases, by using e-commerce. And so when you think about what are the reasons that B2B companies, should invest in e-commerce, well, first and foremost, it is the customer. The customer of the B2B company is demanding e-commerce and digital channels. They demand now that the B2B company removes friction from the buying cycle, from the research cycle, et cetera, when they want to buy product. The staggering fact is that in just 2 years, in 2025, 75% of B2B buyers will be millennials, right? Those born between 1980 and 2000. And those folks are digital natives. In fact, they use Amazon, for example, here in the US, they use Amazon for almost 95% of their online purchases, at least in some parts. And they make more purchases online than they make offline, 60% online versus 40% offline. So if you think about, these buyers and all these buyers moving into procurement roles at B2B companies, they have the same expectations. They don't want to pick up a phone. They don't want to say they don't even know what a fax machine is. I mean, what is a fax machine? They don't want to send an email with their order. They want to be able to go online, find what they want immediately from their suppliers, buy it, and then basically get out of the way, right? Let them, if they know what they want, let them transact via e-commerce. And so it's an imperative for B2B companies, particularly as we went through COVID, right? Where, if you weren't prepared through COVID as a supplier, you lost market share in many cases, right? So it's now a mandate. It's no longer an option to be in e-commerce if you're in B2B. You have to get there, whether you're a supplier, a manufacturer, or a distributor. So I think, that's why the first chapter of my book, when I can talk a little bit about the book too, but is called, the time is now. It's your time is now. You have to take action if you're a B2B company. So it's an imperative, I think.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point, Brian. E-commerce is not an option anymore. It's an imperative, and because the consumers are expecting more digital experiences and do-it-yourself experiences, and your competitors are already there, and you'll have to catch up in order to compete with them or outrun your competition that's already getting ahead. And COVID has also accelerated the digital buying, and consumers have become more accustomed to digital buying ways. So despite the healthy market scenario and the B2B e-commerce market scenarios, growth trajectory of the B2B e-commerce market is also looking great. So despite this healthy change in the market segment, why are most of the B2B companies still only depending on their traditional buying and selling ways?
Because I believe that we're going to see a blend of, and we are seeing this, a blend of traditional selling approaches, the sales force, as well, informed by digital. So I don't believe this is, the death of a salesperson. If you think about the Arthur Miller book, his famous author, who wrote Death of a Salesman, this isn't death of a salesman. This is an evolution. Here's a couple statistics for you. 30%, there was a survey done of CFOs, I think it may have been by McKinsey, that said 30% of people are still going to continue to work from home. We are in a different environment now globally, post-COVID, where people are working from home. There's hybrid work environments. What does that mean for a traditional selling approach? It means you have to change how you're doing sales, right? You can't, getting access to people is not as easy as it used to be, where you can go to an office, walk in and, bring a box of donuts if you're a salesperson, right? And I think, I think, COVID accelerated a lot of things that were already happening. And in many cases, and then necessitated the need for those buyers to go and buy through digital channels. So you may ask yourself, well, gosh, why are companies still not investing in some cases in e-commerce? Well, you still have a lot of legacy momentum and thinking where, this is and I document this in my book, right? This is a brave new world. This is stuff that, e-commerce and digital is stuff that the senior level executives didn't grow up with in many of these companies. They're not comfortable with it. There's a bit of fear. There's a bit of uncertainty. But quite frankly, we got to get beyond that. And companies that are reticent to invest because, business has been just good enough. Well, guess what? With COVID, 50% of buyers are now buying from suppliers they never bought from before. The world has changed. And there was a study done about 2 years ago by a company called Digital Commerce 360. They asked the question, why haven't you invested in e-commerce if you're a B2B company? And the number one and two answers were, number one was they don't have the leadership buy-in. They were asking, marketing and digital and sales executives. They don't have leadership buy-in to make the right investments. And number two was there's not enough money at the company to make the investments that are required. Both of those factors are an indictment of leadership. I think that points directly to, a challenge that exists at the top level of many companies. It's less so now than it used to be. But ultimately it's about the leadership making difficult change and facing uncertainty. If you're uncomfortable, that's a good thing. That means you're doing some of the right things, right?
Yeah, it's growth.
If you're a leader. Yeah, exactly. Real ROI from B2B e-commerce. And that's one of the reasons companies should invest in e-commerce and digital transformation. And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, Rem, it's, people feel like it's reserved only for the biggest companies. But one of there's a case study in my book. It's a small fastener manufacturer distributor, right? So you think about companies that are, mid-market, they're in highly competitive fields. In this case, fastener distribution. I mean, fasteners are a commoditized product. We're talking about screws, nuts, bolts, those kinds of things, right? Yeah. There's nothing more commoditized, really, in the B2B market. So you think about somebody who's running a distribution business who isn't manufacturing the product, so they don't have a brand necessarily to fall back on. Well, this company, they're called Fastening Systems. I've just been so impressed with them. They're doing so many interesting and innovative things. And you talk about why do you do e-commerce? Well, these guys about 6 years ago decided to launch an e-commerce site, right? At a time when a lot of companies still weren't fully engaged in e-commerce. Well, they have almost doubled the size of their business directly attributed to e-commerce. Wow. So they're getting 10 to 20 new customers every single week using digital marketing methods like search engine optimization. And it's because they're well optimized and they launched in their e-commerce site to be SEO friendly. So they're seeing, number one, new customers. And if you're a B2B company and you're listening today, if you're getting 10 new customers a week, that's enormous, right? Because again, B2B companies around, they don't have, they're not 5 million consumers in their database. They have a set group of companies they look to work with, and those companies frequently repurchase. So if I'm a fastener distributor and I'm doing a good job with reaching these customers and then eliminating friction in the buying cycle, I'm going to get them back again and again to buy from me continuously, because it's, guess what? Easy. It's one of the key things I talk about in my book, eliminating friction in the cycle. So why do you do it? Number one, new customers. Number two, expanded wallet share from customers. Some of the companies that I profiled in my book, including Fastening, they're getting more share of wallet from their customers than they had in the past. Why? Because they're doing a good job making it easy for that company to buy from their customers, to buy from them using e-commerce. So, I've got examples of companies that are, 150, 200% more share of wallet from an existing customer. They're getting more of that customer's purchases. And these are existing customers. And again, by making it easier for them to buy and also exposing more of the catalog. Again, you think about fastener distribution, right? Our poster child here, Bay, they've got, tens of thousands of products, hundreds of thousands, I think, actually. And they're more able to, using digital technologies and techniques through their e-commerce site, expose more of their catalog as well. It's hard for a physical salesperson to know everything, or even an inside salesperson to know everything about every aspect of a catalog that's that big. Well, using digital tools and artificial intelligence and search and other things that good e-commerce can deliver, you can expose more of the catalog at the right time to that customer and increase your wallet share. And then finally, there's tremendous, when we think about ROI and in cases like Fastening, there's also tremendous efficiencies. And he's got some metrics. He is the COO who I'm talking about here at Fastening. Michael has some just tremendous statistics around savings and really efficiencies driven by customers self-serving on the e-commerce site, where is my order, looking that up themselves, finding out if something is in stock, checking in on, order or product specs and things of that nature. That stuff happens digitally. And then it saves the time of your sales team to really add value, to become more strategic. And you engage the sales team when it's necessary, not every time. Guess what? The sales team doesn't like getting the calls that say, hey, Joe, where's my order? That's not a great use of a salesperson's time, right? So they're able to repurpose time. So you get this efficiency. There is so much ROI in e-commerce for B2B companies, and it comes from many places. So, I mean, that in itself is reason to do e-commerce. Of course, in addition to your customers demanding it, that's another overriding factor here. But the ROI is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, e-commerce for B2B is not an ROI killer. It's like accelerating ROI. In left, right, and center actually. So like your point on your example about Bay Fasteners, right? Yeah, Bay Fasteners is a real good example, because there is a lot of stages where e-commerce is adding value in terms of ROI, right from offloading sales teams, initial work and all. I mean, in acquiring new customers and all, and by reducing the friction, you save a lot of time, and you keep getting back customers, because in B2B, as you said, they work with a very close set of repeated customers, and most of the B2B companies who are still in traditional ways don't even think of new customer acquisitions. They mostly rely on the word of mouth kind of new customer acquisitions. When B2B commerce is actually opening the gates for acquiring new customers at very less additional cost and effort of the marketing or the sales team. It's a lot of opportunity over there actually. If at all a company has decided to take the digital commerce plunge, and they are preparing to plan their e-commerce transition. So what would be your tips for such a B2B company in order to plan or prepare for their e-commerce transformation from ground up?
Well, the first thing, the very, very first thing you need is to have that leadership buy-in we just talked about, right? Yeah. If we don't have to prove e-commerce. E-commerce is proven, and sometimes I hear from companies, hey, we want to do a proof of concept. We want to, you don't need to do a proof of concept of e-commerce. Yeah. Your customers already want it, and we could talk about different use cases and the role, the extent they want to transact online versus offline. But at the end of the day, digital is the way the new consumer or new business buyer, is transacting with you. So number one, you need to have that leadership buy-in. So check that off the list. The second then is you need to have your customers involved, right? So and you notice I'm not talking about tech yet, because I'll talk about that in a moment. But really, the key things are really business oriented and strategy questions. The customer, who is your customer, and how do they want to interact with you? And involving your customer in the process is critical. Some of the most successful e-commerce and digital transformation rollouts that I've been involved with over the last 5 years in B2B have had heavy involvement. I'll give you an example. My book, again, the book is called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce, by the way. In the book, I have several case studies from a company called Illumina. Illumina is a $3 billion biotechnology company. They're a manufacturer of equipment. It's fascinating what they do. They sequence the human genome. They make equipment that, if you've ever gone to something like a 23andMe or what they call gene sequencing or DNA sequencing service, they use Illumina's equipment to tell you all about your background, your DNA, your makeup, et cetera. And so Illumina, it sounds like a very unlikely candidate, right, for e-commerce transactions. They're selling $1 million machines. So, it's an unlikely candidate. But fact of the matter is, when they rolled out e-commerce, we're going back close to 5 years ago, they really involved the customer all the way through the process, all the way from setting the requirements of what the site needs to do, to gaining alignment on how the customer wanted to use the system, what were the most important features, how they needed to integrate into their systems, those sorts of things. And today, Illumina, this is one of the key reasons they succeeded, is they're getting almost half of their revenue, over $1 billion from e-commerce, which is enormous. It's a huge company, and it's transformational in many regards. It's not just about the transactions. They're getting incremental value, incremental share of wallet from their customer. They're reaching new customers using using the web. So so my number two, factor for success is involving the customers. The third factor of success is sales team. You need the sales team and other parts of the organization aligned with you. If your sales team, when you roll out e-commerce, as I think about B2B, right, a lot of these companies have very large traditional direct sales teams, physical salespeople. And if the physical salespeople are not directly sort of aligned with what you're doing in e-commerce, your implementation will likely fail because they'll fight against it. It's viewed as competitive, or can be. It doesn't have to be. It's actually the sales team's best friend when it's done right. And so that's a third criteria. And then after you get sort of those things, and again, getting back to Illumina, they align the sales team right from the beginning. They had them involved in the whole process. So those are three things that I think are critical to get started. Then you start getting into technology. You need to have the right tech. You need to have the right infrastructure. You need to take your time and select your platform carefully, your partners, like Ziffity. You need to select your partner really carefully as you go through the process. And so number four really is you start getting into the nuts and bolts of tech. You've got to get the business stuff nailed down first, or you're not going to succeed with the tech. It doesn't matter if you have an amazing website, amazing e-commerce, digital experience. If you don't have the alignment of the organization, your customers, you're not doing it for your customers, and your leadership isn't behind it, don't even bother starting. So anyway, just a few thoughts there for your listeners.
Yeah, the success story of Illumina is a real good example of how B2B companies, even if they have complex product offerings, can get into e-commerce and taste real success. And you also reiterated the fact that e-commerce is not going to sunset a sales team in a B2B company. And in fact, it will actually complement the sales team. Those are two very good takeaways for our audience, I guess. And we'll get into the last question of the day, Brian, and it's a quite futuristic question. Like B2B has been playing catch up with B2C for almost many years now. So whatever trend that comes into B2C, it turns out to be a mandate in B2C, and then it transcends to the B2B industry. So take, for example, buy online and pick up in store feature. I mean, like, it was introduced in B2C, and it became a mandate in B2C, and now B2B players are also interested in offering it. I mean, like, and many other do-it-yourself functionalities and features in e-commerce. So that has been the case so far. My question is, like, is there any chance for the B2B industry to evolve on its own, or produce some digital experiences on its own? Or apart from digital experiences, is there possibilities for B2B e-commerce to come out with its own trend or whatever? Yeah, that's the question, Brian.
Absolutely, Ram. It's a great question. First of all, what's most people don't realize is that B2B e-commerce is actually 2.5 times the size in terms of sheer transactional volume versus B2C. So number one, there's a lot of volume already happening there, but at the end of the day, we're just scratching the surface because B2B is behind B2C in many ways. That said, I believe very strongly that B2B has just enormous opportunities to even leapfrog and do much more innovative and interesting things than B2C. In fact, we're starting to see that happen. B2B is branching out and creating its own path. The companies that have really embraced digital transformation and are significantly down the curve can then take the digital infrastructure they have in place, the e-commerce infrastructure, once they have the foundation in place, they can take that and then create entirely new businesses. It's absolutely amazing what can happen. And part of it, and I'll give you an example in a moment, but part of it is because of the nature of B2B, right? You've got these deep traditional relationships where there is a deep understanding of the customer in a way that's actually very hard to achieve in consumer, right? Consumers are more, they're more fickle. They change their minds. It's more about, the adventure of shopping, et cetera. But when you have a B2B relationship, you're talking about someone's business, their livelihood, the success of the business. And by enabling and using digital tools and enabling, transactions and other things and processes digitally, you can help your customers become better at their own business. I'm going to give you an example. The last case study, I think it's the last case study in my book, is a company called Bosch, Robert Bosch, which you may be aware of Bosch. It's a multinational manufacturer of tools and other things. Well, Bosch put a lot of the foundational elements in place years ago for e-commerce as a manufacturer.
Okay.
And what they've been able to do since they've launched that, a few years ago, they launched something called Bluetooth. It's a Bluetooth-based asset tracking system, right? And this tracking system, what they've done, they've taken and they've embedded tracking into the tools, as well as providing assets for them for their customers to place on equipment in the field. So a lot of their customers, Bosch's customers, are construction companies. These are big, large construction companies building big commercial skyscrapers and developments and other things. It turns out that one of the biggest costs that these customers have is labor, and matching labor to the equipment that's in the field, that's being utilized in the field. What they realized, based on their long relationships with these customers, is that they could help these customers better match the location of the equipment to their labor pool. They would then be able to reduce their costs and be more efficient in how they delivered their services. I'm talking about the construction company. So what this Bluetooth tracking system, what they've done with it, they've created software around it so that the customer, the contractor, can then match the labor to the assets, and it's remarkable. They're saving now their customer on one of their biggest costs, which again is the matching of these assets, together, so that they're more efficient, and they're improving their customers' business. At the same time, they've also opened up a new services and software platform for their own business. So Bosch is now able to charge something to their customer, bring value to their customer, increase loyalty from their customer. But none of this would have been possible if they didn't have the digital infrastructure in place to start with, to facilitate all this communication and back and forth. And so it's e-commerce enabled, but it's not just about e-commerce. It's about moving to the next level with your business. So that's what I mean by businesses like they're in the B2B field, being able to leapfrog what some consumer businesses are doing, and our B2C e-commerce field. So that's just one example. I have many others. Illumina has done some similar things with a My Illumina dashboard, integrating technology right into the equipment that they're selling, so that their researchers using their equipment in the labs can actually get better lab results as they run experiments on their through their machines. And it's incredible when you think about, particularly in the equipment side, the potential for IoT, Internet of Things, has when integrated into a robust digital infrastructure. So, this is all next generation future proofing stuff, but you gotta think about your foundation. So many B2B companies, Ram, don't have the basics in place. And frankly, that's where you have to start. So anyway, I hope that's helpful as an example.
Yeah. That was really good, actually. It's almost like a future tech. And I have heard of companies like Earth Moving, JCB and all, using IoT to directly find or identify issues in their machines and all while they are at work in the field. So yeah, that's that would be a very good example, actually, for our audience. Yeah. So
yeah, predictive maintenance. Yeah, exactly right. Preventative maintenance. Sorry. Right. So keep the machines running. That's another big one. Yep.
Yeah, it's like a direct feed from the machines in the field to your lab. It's like a lot of valuable data and a lot of time saved, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly right.
Well, thanks a lot, Brian. Those were really good points that you have highlighted, and I guess your perspectives, opinions, and real e-commerce success stories would have answered a lot of concerning questions that our audiences had in their mind. And it was great interacting with you, and we are looking forward to catching up with you very soon, Brian. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ram, for having me.